The world is full of dangerous ideas, so many in fact, that you can't actually visualise the number in your head, like the number of stars in the sky. It's just something the human mind is not evolved to comprehend. These dangerous ideas are not all created equal, however. Some are more dangerous than others, and some are more longer lasting or short-lived, but nonetheless, they are around, and they will continue to be around for as long as there will be humans on Earth to either think of new ones or to rehash old ones. But what are we to do with them? Especially if, like me, you want a society based on liberty, not coercion. For people who desire a less free state, the ways in which to defeat dangerous ideas appear to be easier than those in states based on liberty, or as Karl Popper would call them, open societies. In an authoritarian or totalitarian state, they don't have to worry about things like liberty, freedom of expression, or freedom of speech. If they deem an idea to be dangerous, they can simply pass a law to say that this ideology is banned, and that all those who adhere to this ideology are now criminals unless they recant. They can use technology to filter their internet to make sure that their citizens are not influenced by these ideas. They can use their power to control the media narrative at home, making sure that the news and other programs on TV don't air this stuff. Now, of course, it's not so simple as that. People will find a way to get around these internet filters and state attempts at censorship. They may use VPNs or create an underground network to smuggle in literature, media, etc. that promote these ideas. But the point I'm trying to make is that closed societies, or authoritarian societies on paper at least, do not have as much of a problem in dealing with ideological threats. Their consciences are clear when it comes to that, and they have no issue censoring anything if it keeps them in power. For those of us who are classical liberals or libertarians, it's not so simple. The idea of total censorship of an idea, no matter how abhorrent, goes against our principles. As John Stuart Mill famously said in On Liberty, bad ideas always hold within them a grain of truth, a part of reality that no matter how much falseness surrounds it, it's still there. And despite all the bad that comes from these ideas, they should be allowed to be expressed, because to lose them would be to lose a part of the bigger truth, the whole picture, so to speak. A socialist might rally against big business and the state, and although his ideology comes with ideas that would and has spelt disaster for humanity, the truth within his point remains. There is an issue with corporatism and excessive state power. The bad ideas, or the falseness surrounding that grain of truth, is that he blames the free market or capitalism for what is the failures of a mixed economy, and wants to use excessive state power to make people more equal and, in his opinion, freer. Therefore, according to Mill, at the very least, this person should be allowed to express these opinions, because to censor him would be to deny us who are more in the right a part of the truth. And he's not wrong. Mill would say that as long as no harm is being done to society at large, he can go about spouting his socialist views until he is blue in the face. But what if this socialist didn't just happen to be spouting his opinions? What if he actually had institutional power? Institutional power in a state that isn't, for all intents and purposes, socialist. In the very optimistic chance that the socialist bites the bullet and does not act on his own deeply held convictions, and does not try to subvert the institution he runs, and does it by the book, society can rest easy and leave him and his cohorts alone. However, in the real world, that doesn't happen. As we have seen in the West, socialists have systematically, over a century, subverted our institutions and our governments. Nowadays, the socialists are called wokeists, or cultural Marxists, and they have taken over from the old left from the late 60s onwards. Whereas the old left tended to create divisions via dividing the various economic classes, trying to destroy the free market, the cultural Marxists have largely ignored class in the classical sense, and have instead decided to use race, gender and sexuality instead. Results may vary, from the deconstruction of everything from our culture to even what it is to be a man or a woman, or to be black or white, to the extent that critical race theory, an idea they push, has taken over the academe and has now filtered through the education system via teachers trained in these universities. It's been one of the main sources of racial division in the past 2 decades, if not more, essentially trying to put whites against everybody else, demonising white people, stoking up hatred by playing on historical grievances of minority communities, to the extent that we have seen what the left call hate crimes against whites increase. Black Lives Matter, and actual discrimination not only in universities but also in employment against straight white males, but now increasingly gay men and Asians. And as a corollary, not even other minorities are free. And when you make a race a political concept, not just a biological one, well, anyone could be made to fit in and to be cast out. When actual harm is being done to the community, what cost does a free society have? This is where Karl Popper's paradox of tolerance comes in. In short, the paradox of tolerance is the fact that in order to protect a tolerant society from the intolerant, the tolerant society must become intolerant. As I mentioned earlier, authoritarian regimes don't have this issue because they are already intolerant to begin with. But as a society that traditionally has valued freedom and liberty, which includes freedom of speech, what, as a tolerant society, are we ought to do in this situation? And how? Well, considering there is evidence in front of us that the far left is eroding our rights slowly over time, and they're actively creating divisions that are creating tangible harm to individuals, not to mention their policies that are meant to raise minority groups like blacks out of being amongst the poorest to the most affluent, keep them in poverty, we can safely say that something has to be done. But how? One way that a tolerant society can deal with the trickle-down ideology is to fully privatise these faculties that spread this cancer, in an effort to price it out of the academe. This has been suggested, and it is a very soft power way of trying a purge. Another example would be to embolden employers and deans, not only in education but in every facet of the economy, by making it easier to fire employees, especially if these employees happen to be far-left whack-job professors who are actively brainwashing students and abusing their positions. Is it censorship? There is an argument to be had that it may well be, but when these ideas are causing actual harm, much like if a person uses their freedom of speech or expression to call for the harm of someone, there is an argument to be had that our tolerance has to run out for that. There's also the long-term strategy of using the leftist activists' tactics against them and perform our own long march through the institutions. It would take decades, but it is achievable, much like what they did, more subtle and not as bad as a totalitarian crackdown. The only place where an authoritarian tactic is necessary is the street violence that is plaguing places like Portland, or wherever groups like Antifa happen to congregate. Criminals have to be dealt with by force and punished harshly. This is fully compatible with liberal principles, and these people do not hide the fact that they want to harm others in the pursuit of their goals. But of course, the trick is not to go far down the path towards totalitarianism to the point we can never come back. We've already done it via the left's attempts to stamp out what they call structural inequalities by destroying free speech and other civil liberties. The last thing we want to do is to go too far and see communists everywhere where there aren't. The idea is that eventually we make it so fringe, but not so fringe that they aren't exiled from society, that they are essentially looked down upon as lunatics by the rest of society, much like the fate of the BNP in the UK. A cringy non-entity with no hope of institutional takeover. That doesn't mean our work could be done. Within a generation, the fight for liberty will happen all over again, which is why the education system needs to be tailored to combat the next generation of totalitarians, wherever they come from. I hope this video helped explain what we could do as people who want to have a free society based on liberal principles against harmful subversive elements. The paradox of tolerance does not say that we have to tolerate our own destruction. We can defend ourselves, even if it means being intolerant. We just have to have the self-restraint as a people, as a culture, to know when the fight is won and over. Until next time, I'll see you all later.